Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Cat Tales, a Warrior Cats reread podcast. My name is Coffee, and I'm your host. I believe last time, where we left off, Fireheart and Graystripe were sent on a mission to retrieve WindClan because they had been driven out of their home by Broken Star, the evil dictator previous leader of ShadowClan, who got driven out and taken down in the last book. So today we're going to be reading chapters 4 through 7, and it's a lot of content today. Not necessarily filler, but there's a lot of things that happen and go on, so we're going to get started. Chapter 4 starts with, quote, "As they headed out of camp, the two young warriors nearly crashed into Whitestorm, who was leading Sandpaw and Running Wind into the forest for the dawn patrol. Sorry, panted Fireheart. He stopped, and Graystripe skidded to a halt beside him. Whitestorm dipped his head. I hear you two are going on a mission, he meowed. Yes, Fireheart replied. Then may you have StarClan's protection, meowed Whitestorm gravely. What for? Sandpaw sneered. You off to catch voles? Running Wind, a lean tabby, turned and whispered something into Sandpaw's ear. Her expression changed, and the contempt in her green eyes switched to a guarded curiosity. Maybe she's actually going to start taking them seriously? I don't know, they kind of drove out a dictator, so, cut them some slack. So Fireheart and Graystripe run all the way to Four Trees. Graystripe comments on how it's always windy up here. Fireheart replies that he supposes there aren't any trees to block it, and so they end up on WindClan territory. And then Fireheart picks up a fresh scent. He asks Graystripe if he can smell it, and Graystripe says yes. So RiverClan is in fact hunting on WindClan's territory. They crouch in some bushes and spy on them, and Graystripe spots them. He says, I can see them. They're hunting. 4 RiverClan warriors were chasing a rabbit through a patch of gorse. Fireheart recognized Blackclaw from the gathering. The smoky black warrior pounced, his claws unsheathed, but sat up again with nothing to show for the chase. The rabbit must have made it to the safety of her warren. Fireheart and Graystripe dropped down again and pressed their bellies against the cold turf. They're not good rabbit hunters, Graystripe hissed scornfully. I guess RiverClan is more used to catching fish, Fireheart whispered back. His nose twitched as he smelled the scent of a terrified rabbit coming nearer. With a pang of dread, Fireheart heard the paw steps of the RiverClan warriors fast approaching after it. They're coming this way. We'll have to hide. Follow me, whispered Graystripe. I smell badgers this way. Badgers? Fireheart echoed. Is that safe? He had heard a story of how Halftail had lost his tail in a fight with a bad-tempered old Brock. When Brock was mentioned here, I thought of Brock from Pokemon. Imagine if Brock from Pokemon was in Warrior Cats. That would be crazy. No, but Brock is just another word for a badger, which must be another Britishism, I guess. There's a lot of Britishisms in these early books. Graystripe says, Don't worry, the scent is strong but stale. There must be an old set near here. Fireheart sniffed. His scent glands picked up a strong, almost fox-like scent. Are you sure it's abandoned? We'll know soon enough. Come on, we've got to get out of here, replied Graystripe. He led the way quickly through the low bushes. The rustle of heather told Fireheart the RiverClan warriors were closing in. Here! Graystripe shouldered aside a tuft of heather to reveal a sandy hole in the ground. Get inside. The badger's scent will disguise ours. We can wait till they're gone. Fireheart slipped speedily into the dark hole, and Graystripe followed him. The stench of badger was overwhelming. Paw steps thudded on the ground overhead. Both cats held their breath as the steps halted, and one of the RiverClan warriors yelled, Badger set! From the rasping mew, Fireheart knew it was Blackclaw. A second voice answered, Is it abandoned? The rabbit may be hiding inside. Fireheart felt Graystripe's fur bristling beside him in the dark. He unsheathed his claws and stared at the entrance to the hole, ready to fight if the warriors came inside. Wait, the scent leads this way, meowed Blackclaw. There was a scrabble of paws overhead as the RiverClan warriors charged away. They wait for a bit to make sure the RiverClan cats are gone, and then decide to go to WindClan's camp to pick up their scent. So they get to WindClan's camp, and they look around, and quote, As they neared the hollow, Fireheart raced past Graystripe and gazed over the edge. It looked as if a StarClan warrior had reached down from the sky, scooped a paw full of peat from the plateau, and replaced it with a thick tangle of gorse that grew almost to the level of the ground on either side. Fireheart sniffed. He could smell many scents, all WindClan, old and young, male and female, and, in the background, the faint odor of fresh kill that had long since become crow food. This had to be the abandoned camp. Fireheart bounded down the slope and plunged into the bushes. The gorse tugged at his fur and scratched his nose, making his eyes water. He could hear Graystripe behind him, cursing as thorns snagged his ears. They pushed through into a sheltered clearing. The sandy ground had been trodden hard by generations of paws. At one end of the clearing stood a rock, worn smooth by many wind-blown moons. This is their camp, all right, Fireheart murmured. I can't believe Broken Star managed to drive WindClan out of such a well-protected place, meowed Graystripe, rubbing his sore nose with one paw. It looks like they put up a good fight, Fireheart pointed out, realizing with a jolt how badly ravaged the camp was. Clumps of fur littered the ground, and dried blood stained the sand. Mossy nests had been dragged out of dens and torn apart, and everywhere, stale ShadowClan scents mingled with the smell of terrified WindClan cats. Fireheart shuddered. "Let's find the scent trail out of here," he meowed. He began to sniff the air carefully and moved forward, following the strongest scent. Graystripe padded after him to a narrow gap in the gorse. "WindClan cats must be even smaller than I remember," grumbled Graystripe as he squeezed through after Fireheart. Fireheart glanced at his friend, amused for a moment. The scent trail was quite clear now. Definitely WindClan, but mixed and pungent, as if made by many frightened cats. Fireheart looked down. Drops of dried blood dotted the ground. "We're heading the right way," he meowed darkly. 2 moons of rain and wind had failed to wash away the signs of suffering. If 2 months can't wash this away, this must have been very bad. Fireheart could clearly picture the defeated and injured clan fleeing from their home. With a surge of anger, he bounded after his friend. They follow the trail to the edge of WindClan territory, where they can see the two-leg farmland and high stones. They hope to not run into Nightpelt, because he is going to the Moonstone the same night to receive his 9 lives from StarClan. And Fireheart remembers the last time they were here and met Barley, fought the rats, and Bluestar lost a life, and he hopes Ravenpaw made it to Barley safely. "It doesn't look as if they were heading for High Stones," Graystripe remarked. The trail took them sideways into a wide grassy field. They skirted the edge, staying near the hedgerow as WindClan had done. The scent led them out of the field and onto a 2-leg path through a small copse of trees. "Look," Graystripe meowed. Sun-bleached piles of prey bones lay scattered in the undergrowth. Mossy bedding had been gathered beneath the thickest patches of brambles. "WindClan must have tried to settle here," Fireheart meowed in surprise. "I wonder what made them leave?" asked Graystripe, sniffing the air. "The scent is old." Fireheart shrugged, and the 2 cats followed the trail onward to a thick hedge. With a bit of a struggle, they wriggled through onto a grass verge. Beyond a narrow ditch lay a wide earth track. Graystripe leaped nimbly over the ditch and onto the hard red track. Fireheart looked around, stiffening as he recognized a hard-edged silhouette in the distance. "Graystripe, stop!" he hissed. "What's up?" Fireheart pointed with his nose. "Look at that 2-leg place over there. We must be near Barley's territory." Graystripe's ears twitched nervously. "That's where those dogs live. But WindClan definitely came this way. We'll have to hurry. We need to get past the 2-leg nest before sunset." Fireheart remembered Barley telling them that the 2-legs let the dogs loose at night, and the sun was already sinking toward the craggy tops of High Stones. He nodded. Perhaps the dogs chased WindClan out of the woods. With an anxious twinge, he thought of Ravenpaw. "Do you think he found Barley?" he asked. "Who, Ravenpaw? Why not? We made it this far," meowed Graystripe. "Don't underestimate him. Remember the time Tigerclaw sent him to Snake Rocks? He came back with an adder." Fireheart is amused at the memory and follows Graystripe. They manage to avoid the dogs in the 2-leg place. The sun sets, and they decide to keep going, even if the trail leads to High Stones. They'll only stop when they have to. And then they keep following the trail to a hedge beside a thunder path that's pretty near High Stones. They find the WindClan scent underneath this hedge. They sheltered here, Fireheart meowed, imagining the terrified WindClan cats staring through the hedge at the thunder path. This was probably the first time most of them had seen the thunder path, Graystripe remarked as he joined Fireheart by the hedge. Fireheart looked at his friend in surprise. He had never met a WindClan cat. They had been driven out of their territory almost as soon as he had become an apprentice. "Didn't they patrol their borders?" he asked, puzzled. "You've seen their territory. It's pretty wild and barren, and the prey's not easy to catch. I guess they never thought any of the other clans would bother hunting there. After all, RiverClan has their river, and in a good year, our forests are filled with prey, so no cat needs their skinny rabbits." A monster roared past on the other side of the hedge, its night eyes glaring. Fireheart and Graystripe flinched as the wind buffeted their fur even through the wall of leaves. When the noise had faded away, they sat up cautiously and sniffed around the roots of the hedge. "The trail seems to lead under here." Fireheart squeezed onto the grass verge that lay along the thunder path. Graystripe scrabbled through behind him. But on the other side of the hedge, the scent trail stopped abruptly. "They must have either doubled back or crossed the thunder path," Fireheart meowed. "You look around here, and I'll check out the other side." He fought to keep his voice calm, but exhaustion was making him desperate. Surely they couldn't have lost the trail now, after coming so far. That's the end of chapter 4. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee and my water here. Sorry if my voice is kind of gravelly. I usually don't record first thing in the morning, but I have a lot of stuff to do the week that I'm recording this, so I just had to squeeze it in where I could. Alright, chapter 5. So Fireheart goes to the other side of the thunder path. He can't catch their scent at first, but as a monster roars past, it drags up a whiff of WindClan's scent. Fireheart called as loudly as he could to Graystripe. There was a pause, then the sound of paws pounding across the thunder path to join him. "Have you found it?" puffed his friend. "Not sure. I got a whiff, but I can't pinpoint it." Fireheart pushed his way through the hedge, Graystripe right behind him. He lifted his nose toward the open field ahead of them. "Have you any idea what's over there?" "No," replied Graystripe. I shouldn't think any clan cat has ever been this far. Except WindClan, muttered Fireheart darkly. Away from the confusing fumes of the Thunderpath, the trail was suddenly clear. WindClan had definitely come this way. The two cats struck out through the long grass, straight across the field. Fireheart! Graystripe sounded alarmed. What is it? Look! Fireheart stopped and lifted his head. He saw a thunderpath ahead of them arching high into the air on massive stone legs, illuminated by the eyes of the monsters that moved along it. Another thunderpath ran below, veering off into the darkness. So this is obviously like a highway junction of some sort. Probably pretty intimidating for cats. Graystripe nodded toward a tall thistle. And smell this. Fireheart inhaled the scent. It was a fresh WindClan marker. They must have settled somewhere near here, Graystripe murmured in disbelief. A pang of excitement twisted Fireheart's stomach. Both cats looked silently at each other for a moment. Then, without a word, they moved on toward the stinking thunderpaths. Graystripe spoke at last. Why would WindClan come to a place like this? I guess not even Broken Star would want to follow them here, Fireheart answered grimly. He stopped. A thought was nagging at him. Graystripe paused beside him. What is it? If WindClan is hiding so near the thunderpaths, Fireheart meowed slowly, they must be fairly desperate not to be found. They're more likely to trust us if we arrive in daylight than if we creep up on them in darkness. Which is very true, so they decide to rest until it's light out and start again in the morning. Neither of them are hungry, either because of the traveling herbs lowering their appetite or because the stench of the thunderpath. They need to find some place to sleep. They come across a dark shadow or hole of some kind, and they realize it's a burrow or a tunnel and decide to investigate. And it leads right under the thunderpaths. And so they decide to sleep there for the night. They sleep until it's almost dawn, and then they decide to keep going through the tunnel. End quote. Before long, Fireheart spotted light ahead of them. They quickened their pace until they were racing up a short, steep slope that led them into a world filled with gray dawnlight. They had come up near the edge of a patch of barren, dirty grass. Thunderpaths enclosed it on two sides, and another arched overhead. A fire burned in the middle of the grass. A few two-legs lay around it. One of them stretched and rolled over, and another grunted angrily in its sleep, but the noise and stench from the thunderpaths didn't seem to wake them. Fireheart watched them warily, then froze as something else caught his eye. Dark outlines that flitted back and forth in front of the flames. Cats! Could it be WindClan? Fireheart looked at the fire and the cats, and his mind flooded with the memory of his dream. The noise of the thunderpath, the sight of the flames and the cats, and Spotted Leaf's voice murmuring, "Fire will save the clan." A surge of emotion made Fireheart's legs feel weak. Did this mean that ThunderClan's fate was bound up with the fate of WindClan? And that's interesting. I never thought the clan part of the prophecy could mean WindClan. Maybe the prophecy is fire alone can save WindClan. That seems interesting, but also that feels a little too easy, especially since this is only the second book out of 6 in this arc. But we'll see. Fireheart? Fireheart! Graystripe's voice jolted Fireheart back to reality. He breathed deeply to calm himself. We must find Tallstar and speak with him, he meowed. Then you think it is WindClan? Asked Graystripe. You smelled their marker. Who else could it be? Fireheart replied. Graystripe looked at him, his eyes shining with triumph. We found them. Fireheart nodded. He didn't point out that finding WindClan was only half their mission. They still had to convince them that it was safe to return home. Graystripe braced himself, ready to leap forward. Let's go! Hang on, Fireheart warned. We don't want to startle them. So they make their way across the expanse of grass where the two legs are. The two legs, unfortunately, wake up, and WindClan scatters. Fire and Graystripe run after them. A two-leg throws something at them and misses, and they get to safety under the high thunderpath, the one with the stone legs. The WindClan cats stop next to a great stone leg and disappear into the ground. Quote, cautiously, the two friends approached the spot where the WindClan cats had vanished. As they neared, they saw a hole in the earth. Like their resting place on the previous night, the entrance was round and lined with stone, sloping away into utter blackness. Fireheart led the way, all his senses alert for a WindClan patrol. The floor beneath his paws felt wet and slimy, and the sound of trickling water echoed around them. As the tunnel leveled out, Fireheart pricked his ears and opened his mouth. The damp air smelled rank and bitter, worse than the tunnel they had slept in. Here, the thunderpath fumes mingled with the fierce scent of WindClan cats. It was too dark to see anything, but after a few paces, Fireheart's whiskers sensed a turning in the tunnel. Fireheart flicked his tail, touching Graystripe lightly with its tip. He couldn't see his friend in the blackness, but Graystripe must have felt the signal, because he stopped beside Fireheart, and together they peered around the corner. Ahead of them, the tunnel was lit by a narrow hole in the ceiling that led to the wasteland above. Fireheart could see many cats huddled together in the gray light. Warriors and elders, queens and kits, all pitifully thin. A cold breeze blew relentlessly through the hole in the roof, stirring the thin fur on the skinny bodies. Fireheart shuddered, for the breeze carried to him the stench of sickness and crow food. Suddenly the tunnel shook as a monster roared overhead. Graystripe and Fireheart, already tense, jumped, but the WindClan cats didn't react. They simply huddled with half-closed eyes, numb to their surroundings. The noise died away. Fireheart took a deep breath and stepped around the corner, out into the thin light. A gray WindClan Tom spun around, his fur standing on end as he yowled in alarm to the rest of the clan. In one smooth movement, the WindClan warriors formed a line across the tunnel in front of the queens and elders, their backs arched, hissing fiercely. With a feeling of dread, Fireheart saw the glint of unsheathed claws and thorn-sharp fangs. These half-starved cats were about to attack. Which is not good, but also I get it, because they must be very, very scared. That's the end of Chapter 5. We're getting through this rather quick because it's a lot of descriptive content and there's not a ton of dialogue to make comments on. So I think this episode will probably be shorter. Well, before we get into Chapter 6, I do want to say they found WindClan way faster than I thought. I thought this plot point would take like the entire book, but it doesn't. I guess there's way more plot to this book than just finding WindClan. So we'll see. Chapter 6 starts with, quote, Fireheart pressed his body warningly against Graystripe, who had padded out to join him. They had to show no threat if they were to survive. The WindClan warriors stood their ground without moving a muscle. They're waiting for a signal from their leader, Fireheart realized. They still follow the warrior code, even though they have to live like this. Which is a good sign. They haven't completely disbanded from cat society. From behind the line of warriors, a black and white Tom weaved his way to the front. With a jolt, Fireheart recognized the long-tailed cat from his dream. This must be Tallstar, leader of WindClan. Tallstar sniffed the air, but Fireheart and Graystripe were downwind, their scents carried away by the steady breeze. As the black and white cat walked toward them, Fireheart breathed in the rank odor of crow food that hung on his coat. Like Graystripe, he remained perfectly still, his eyes down, as Tallstar circled them, sniffing their fur closely. Finally, Tallstar returned to his warriors. Fireheart heard him murmur, ThunderClan. The warriors flattened their fur, but remained in a defensive line, shielding the rest of the cats. Tallstar turned to face his visitors and sat down, curling his tail carefully around his paws. I was expecting ShadowClan, he growled, his eyes burned with hostility. Why are you here? We came to find you, Fireheart meowed, feeling his voice crack with tension. Bluestar and the other clan leaders want you to return to your home. The WindClan leader's voice was still wary. That land is not safe for my clan anymore, he meowed. There was a hunted look in Tallstar's eye that sent a pang of sorrow through Fireheart. ShadowClan has driven out Broken Star, he meowed. He is no longer a threat. The warriors behind Tallstar turned and looked at one another. Murmurs of surprise rippled back through the clan. You must return as soon as possible, Fireheart urged. ShadowClan and RiverClan are starting to hunt in the uplands. We saw a RiverClan hunting patrol near the old badger set while we were on our way here. Tallstar bristled angrily. But they are poor rabbit hunters, Graystripe added. I think they went home with empty bellies. Tallstar and his warriors purred with satisfaction. Their good spirits encouraged Fireheart, but he could see how weak they were. This clan would find the journey back to the uplands long and hard. May we travel with you? He suggested respectfully. Tallstar's eyes flashed. He knew the question was a tactful offer of help. He looked steadily at Fireheart. Yes, he replied at last. Thank you. Fireheart realized he hadn't introduced himself. This is Graystripe, he meowed, dipping his head. And I am Fireheart. We are warriors of ThunderClan. Fireheart, repeated Tallstar thoughtfully. Sunlight was flooding through the gap in the roof now, making Fireheart's orange pelt glow in the dim tunnel. The name suits you. Yet another main character moment. So, WindClan round up their cats and decide to take turns carrying a queen called Morning Flower's kit because it's too young to walk. End quote. Fireheart and Graystripe turned and made their way back to the tunnel entrance and waited while the WindClan cats emerged, blinking into the daylight. Some of the elders blinked so long their faces screwed up against the weak sun that Fireheart guessed they had not been outside the tunnel for some time. Tallstar padded out of the tunnel last of all and walked to the head of his clan. Shall we take you back the way you came? Fireheart asked him. I believe it's a shortcut. Is it safe? Asked Tallstar. Fireheart saw the hunted look once more in the leader's eyes. We meant no trouble coming here, Graystripe meowed. Tallstar flicked his tail decisively, as though he were brushing away any doubt. Good, he declared. You come with me, Graystripe. Show me the way. Fireheart, travel beside the clan. Tell my deputy if you see trouble. Which one is he? Asked Fireheart. Tallstar nodded toward the Black Tom. Deadfoot, he meowed. The warrior turned at the sound of his name and pricked his ears. Fireheart dipped his head in greeting. He left Graystripe with Tallstar and joined the other cats. So they head back the way they came. The two legs are gone, and they reach the last thunder path they need to cross before they get closer to ThunderClan territories. Deadfoot tells Tallstar to slow down. Several WindClan cats are struggling to keep up, including Morning Flower. Fireheart offers to carry her kit, and she agrees. He stays right next to her so she can keep an eye on her kit. Tallstar slowed the pace, but only a little. In spite of his obvious exhaustion and the fact that every rib showed under his fur, he burned with a fierce energy that lent swiftness to his paws. Fireheart could understand part of the reason for his urgency. The sun was steadily climbing above the horizon. Some of the WindClan cats were sick, some old, and all of them were weak from hunger. If they were going to cross the Thunderpath without losing any cats, they would have to do it quickly, before the monsters came in swarms. So they get to the Thunderpath, Tallstar announces they will cross. Morningflower takes her kit back from Fireheart and thanks him. Tallstar and Fireheart decide that the strongest group will go first. Fireheart meets One Whisker, a mottled brown tabby, and offers to cross with his group, and One Whisker declines. 2 larger groups crossed, leaving just 1 more. Only once they were safely over would Tallstar and Deadfoot cross. Morningflower and her kit stepped up to Fireheart's side. Behind her trembled 3 very elderly cats. "We'll cross with you," Fireheart meowed. He looked at Graystripe, who nodded. "Tell us when it's safe to go, Graystripe." Fireheart leaned forward to take Morningflower's kit, but she pulled back, her ears flat. Fireheart looked deep into her frightened amber eyes and understood. She and her kit would live or die together. "Now!" At Graystripe's yell, Fireheart and Morningflower stepped out onto the Thunderpath. The elders crept out behind them with Graystripe beside them. Time seemed to stand still as the elders hobbled slowly forward on stiff, battle-scarred legs. "If a monster comes now, we're all fresh kill," Fireheart thought. The other side was still several rabbit leaps away. "Come on," urged Graystripe. The elders tried to hurry, but one stumbled, and Graystripe had to nose him back onto his paws. Fireheart heard the distant roar of a monster. "Go on ahead," he hissed to Morningflower. "We'll bring the elders." Morningflower stumbled forward. Her kit squealed as it bumped against the hard ground. Fireheart and Graystripe pressed themselves against the elders' scrawny bodies, nudging them forward. The noise of the approaching monster grew louder and louder. Fireheart grabbed the nearest elder by the scruff of the neck and dragged him forward, before turning to haul the second closer to the verge. The monster raced closer. Fireheart closed his eyes and braced himself. There was a screech and an acrid smell that stung his throat, then a fading roar as the monster sped away. Fireheart opened his eyes and looked around. Graystripe was crouching in the middle of the Thunderpath, unscathed, but staring with eyes as wide as full moons. One elder cowered between them. The other 2 trembled near the verge. The monster was hurtling away from them, swerving across the Thunderpath. Thanks, StarClan. It had missed them all. So, that was a scary moment. They get the last elder across. Tallstar gathers his clan. One Whisker touched Fireheart's nose with his own. "You would have died for us," he murmured. "WindClan will never forget that." Okay, why are they kind of gay here? Hold on. Tallstar's voice sounded behind them. "One Whisker is right. We shall honor you both in our stories. We must keep going," he continued. "We have a long journey ahead of us." Fireheart asks Morningflower if her kit is all right. She says yes. He asks, "What about you?" But she doesn't answer, so she must have been very scared, and a Gray Queen takes the kit next. So they reach the 2-leg place, but WindClan is slowing down big time, which is honestly fair. They've been traveling a long time. Fireheart tries to scent Ravenpaw, but can't, and is sad, and kind of regrets sending him there alone, because still not sure if Ravenpaw made it. Fireheart looked at the WindClan cats. There was no way they could travel through a long, wet night. He was tired too, and for the first time since he'd eaten Yellowfang's herbs, he was feeling the effects of hunger. A glance at Graystripe told him that his friend felt the same way. The big gray warrior's tail drooped, and his ears were flattened against the spattering rain. "Tallstar," Fireheart called. "Perhaps we should stop soon and shelter for the night." The WindClan leader stopped and waited while Fireheart caught up with him. "I agree," he meowed. "There's a ditch here. We can shelter in that until sunrise." Graystripe and Fireheart exchanged glances. "We might be better sheltering in the hedgerow," Fireheart suggested. "There are rats in these ditches." Tallstar nodded. "Very well." He turned to his clan and announced they would be spending the night here. The queens and elders flopped down at once despite the rain, while the warriors and apprentices gathered to discuss hunting patrols. Fireheart and Graystripe joined them. "I don't know how good the hunting will be here," Fireheart meowed. "There are too many 2-legs. Graystripe's stomach growled as if in agreement. The other warriors turned to him with amused but sympathetic eyes. Then they froze as the grass behind them rustled. The WindClan warriors bristled and arched their backs, unsheathing sharp claws, but Fireheart and Graystripe turned their heads joyfully. The wind carried a scent as familiar as their own den. "Ravenpaw!" Fireheart gasped as a sleek black cat emerged from the long grass. "So he's alive!" Fireheart raced over to his old friend and nuzzled him. "Thanks, StarClan, you're safe," he purred. He stepped back and studied Ravenpaw in surprise. What had happened to the skinny, scared black apprentice? This cat was plump and sleek, and his fur, usually so dull before, now shed the rain like a holly leaf. "Firepaw!" Ravenpaw meowed in delight. "Fireheart," Graystripe corrected him. He stepped forward and touched noses with the black cat. "We're warriors now. I'm Graystripe." "Do you know this cat?" snarled Deadfoot. The hostility in his voice made Fireheart flinch. He looked at the bristling WindClan cats and silently cursed himself for calling Ravenpaw's name too loud. He just hoped Tallstar's warriors had been too distracted to hear it. If WindClan mentioned it at a gathering, it would spread through the clans like a forest fire. Ravenpaw was supposed to be dead. "Is he a loner?" asked One Whisker. "He can help us find food," Fireheart meowed quickly, glancing at Ravenpaw. The black cat nodded. "I know all the best places to hunt around here," he meowed. His fur didn't even bristle beneath so many hostile gazes. How much he has changed, Fireheart thought. This makes me really happy. The wonders of living in a non-abusive situation. Crazy. Why would a loner help us? Demanded Deadfoot. Loners have helped us before, Graystripe told him. Another loner once saved us from a rat attack near here. Ravenpaw stepped forward and bent his head respectfully as he addressed the WindClan warriors. Let me help you. I owe my life to Fireheart and Graystripe, and if they're traveling with you, then you must be friends. He lifted his eyes and let his gaze rest on the WindClan cats. They returned to stare, more wary now than hostile. The rain was falling harder, and, with their fur bedraggled, they looked skinnier than ever. Ravenpaw says he'll go find Barley. Tallstar asks if they can trust Ravenpaw, and Fireheart says, completely. Ravenpaw comes back with Barley and leads them to shelter. Tallstar tells the on-edge WindClan that they must trust him, and honestly, they don't really have much less of a choice if they want to get out of the rain. So, Barley and Ravenpaw led them through the hedge into another field. In an overgrown corner, among the brambles and nettles, stood an abandoned two-leg nest. The walls were full of holes where stones had fallen out, and only half the roof was left. The WindClan cat stared fearfully at it. You won't get me in there, muttered one of the elders. Two legs never come here now, Barley reassured them. It'll give us some shelter from the rain, urged Fireheart. One of the apprentices whispered loudly, I'm not surprised he wants to hide in a two-leg nest. Once a kitty pet, always a kitty pet. Fireheart has been facing a lot of xenophobia in the past book and a half. I feel bad for him. Fireheart bristled. He hadn't heard that insult for several moons, but the story that a kitty pet had joined a clan must have made rich gossip at any gathering. Of course WindClan would know. He whipped around and glared at the apprentice. You've spent 2 moons living in a two-leg tunnel. Does that make you a rat? Ooh, get him. That was good. That was very good. The WindClan apprentice drew himself up, ruffling out his fur, but Graystripe stepped between them. Come on, we're just getting wetter the longer we stand out here. Tallstar meowed. We faced worse than a two-leg shelter these past moons. One night here will do us no harm. The WindClan cats murmured nervously among themselves, clearly reluctant, but with a glance at Fireheart, Morningflower picked up her kit and padded into the two-leg shelter. The Grey Queen followed after her, nudging her own kit forward out of the rain. The other cats gradually followed until every cat was inside. Fireheart looked around the gloomy shelter. The ground was bare except for patches where weeds had burrowed their way under the stone walls. The wind and rain found their way through the gaps in the walls and roof, but it was drier and more sheltered than anywhere outside. He watched the WindClan cats sniffing cautiously around. As they began to settle themselves away from the dripping holes and drafty cracks, he glanced at Graystripe, relieved. Only Tallstar and Deadfoot remained on their paws. What about food? Asked Deadfoot. Barley spoke. You should all be resting, he meowed. Fireheart interrupted him before Barley could finish saying Ravenpaw's name out loud. Why don't you two show me and Graystripe the best places to hunt around here? Deadfoot and One Whisker will go with you, meowed Tallstar. Fireheart couldn't decide if the WindClan leader still didn't trust these two strangers, or if he was determined to show that his clan could look after itself. The 6 cats ventured back out into the rain. Hunting would be hard, but Fireheart was starving. Hunger always made him a better hunter. Tonight the voles and mice wouldn't stand a chance. Just show me where they are, he meowed to Barley and Ravenpaw. The 2 cats led them into a small patch of woodland. Fireheart breathed in a lungful of the familiar scent. Then he dropped into a hunting crouch and began to stalk into the ferns. They hunt successfully. Each cat carries a whole mouthful of fresh kill. The WindClan cats share a feast with their new allies that night. Every single cat eats their fill, and they curl up together and share tongues, and outside the wind and rain is lashing against the walls. Barley says, I'm off, rats to catch. Fireheart thanks him and says, this is the second time you've helped us. Barley replies and says, thank you for sending Ravenpaw to me. He's turning into a fine ratter, and it's good to share a meal with a fellow cat from time to time. And I looked up the definition of ratter. It's what you would think. It's a dog or other animal used for hunting rats. Probably another Britishism. I've never heard the word ratter. Fireheart asks if Ravenpaw's happy here, and Barley says, ask him yourself, which, fair enough. Fireheart tells Tallstar that he and Graystripe can take it in turns to keep watch tonight, and Tallstar says thank you. His offer to Tallstar had been genuine, but it also meant he could be alone with his 2 friends. So they go to a corner of the 2-leg nest, close enough to the entrance to keep watch, but far enough away from the other cats that they can talk in private. So what happened after we left you? He asked Ravenpaw as soon as the 3 friends had settled down. I headed straight across the WindClan territory, like you suggested. What about the 2-legs dogs? Graystripe put in. Were they loose? Yes, but it was easy to avoid them, Ravenpaw told him. Fireheart was surprised by how casually his friend dismissed the dogs. Easy, he echoed. I could smell them from a long way off. I just waited until dawn, and once the dogs were tied up again, I tracked down Barley. He's been great. I think he likes having me around. Ravenpaw's expression suddenly clouded. Which is more than Tigerclaw ever did, he meowed bitterly. What did you tell him? Fireheart recognized the hunted look in Ravenpaw's eyes as he spoke about his old mentor. We said you'd been killed by a ShadowClan patrol, he answered quietly. 2 WindClan apprentices were wandering toward them. Fireheart twitched his ears to warn his friends they had an audience. "Oh, yes," meowed Ravenpaw, raising his voice. "We loners eat clan apprentices whenever we catch one." The WindClan apprentices shot him a scornful look. "You don't scare us," they mewed. "Really?" purred Ravenpaw. "Well, I guess your meat would be tough and stringy anyway." "How come you're such good friends with a loner?" one apprentice asked Fireheart. "A wise warrior makes friends wherever he can," Fireheart replied. "If it weren't for this loner, we'd still be cold and hungry instead of dry and well fed." He narrowed his eyes in warning, and the apprentices slunk away. "He's so right. Socialism. So ThunderClan thinks I'm dead," meowed Ravenpaw when they had gone. He gazed down at his paws. "Well, it's probably for the best." He lifted his eyes and looked at Fireheart and Graystripe. "I'm glad I've seen you again," he meowed warmly. Fireheart purred, and Graystripe prodded his friend affectionately with a hind paw. "But you look tired," Ravenpaw continued. "You should get some sleep. I'll keep watch tonight. I can rest tomorrow." He stood up and gently licked each of his old friends on the head. Then he padded to the entrance of the shelter, sat down, and stared out into the rain. Fireheart looked at Graystripe. "Are you tired?" "Exhausted," admitted Graystripe. The gray warrior rested his head on his paws and closed his eyes. Fireheart took a final look at Ravenpaw sitting alone in the entrance. He knew now that he had made the right decision in helping Ravenpaw to leave ThunderClan. Perhaps Bluestar had been right when she'd said Ravenpaw would be better off without the clan. Each cat has his own destiny, he thought. Ravenpaw was happy, and that was all that mattered. I love his seeming change of heart about this. Yeah, he's right. Like, if you're happy somewhere else, you should be happy there instead of unhappy in a place where, other people think you should be. So there's a time skip. It's the next day. When Fireheart woke, Ravenpaw was gone. It was past dawn. The gray rain clouds had begun to drift away. Tinged by the rosy glow of the rising sun, they looked like blossoms floating across a pond. Fireheart stared through a gap in the roof and watched them as the WindClan cats stirred and helped themselves to the leftovers of last night's catch. A short-tailed brown tom joined Fireheart and gazed up at the clouds with him. Fireheart jumped as a curious yowl suddenly escaped the brown tom's throat. The noise brought the other WindClan cats crowding around them, murmuring and anxious. "What is it, Barkface?" prompted Morningflower. "Has StarClan spoken to you?" Fireheart realized that this tom must be WindClan's medicine cat. He tensed instinctively at the sight of Barkface's bristling fur. "The clouds are stained with blood," rasped Barkface, his eyes wide and glazed. "It is a sign from our ancestors. There's trouble ahead. This day shall bring an unnecessary death." That's the end of chapter 6. I guess if it ain't one thing, it's another. They really cannot catch a break here. Then we're gonna get into chapter 7, the last chapter of the day. For a moment, none of the cats moved or spoke. Then Deadfoot growled. "Any of the cats could see those clouds. We can't be sure that the message is for us." Hopeful mews spread through WindClan. Tallstar surveyed his clan, then meowed calmly. "Whatever StarClan has planned for us, today we return to our home. I can smell more rain in the air. It's time we set off." Fireheart felt relieved at the leader's practical tone. The last thing they needed was hysteria at an ominous prophecy, which is honestly true. Fireheart offers to scout ahead. Tallstar agrees and says, "Let me know if you see dogs, two legs, or rats. My clan is stronger this morning, but we had trouble with dogs on the way out. We must stay alert." And Fireheart could tell that Tallstar is genuinely worried about Barkface's warning. So Fireheart and Graystripe race off and scout ahead. They take turns going back to the clan, telling Tallstar that the way ahead was clear, or warning him to stay back while a two-leg passed by with the dog. The WindClan cats obey their leader, and they just keep going, and they're still very tired despite their good night of rest. By noon, dark clouds gather in the sky, and it's starting to rain. Fireheart recognizes the red dirt track that leads away from two-leg territory into WindClan's hunting grounds, and he realizes they're nearly there. The WindClan cats catch up with them. Fireheart shows him the way, and he's eager to see WindClan's reaction when they glimpse the uplands on the other side. And Deadfoot starts leading them through. Fireheart follows close behind the last cat, but their pace had quickened. They clearly knew where they were, and Fireheart follows behind them. Quote, "At the foot of the slope, Deadfoot and his warriors paused to wait for the rest of the clan. They closed their eyes against the rain, but held their heads high. Fireheart could see their chests rising and falling as they breathed in the familiar scents sweeping from the uplands. Fireheart ran back to the rest of the clan, looking for Morningflower. He spotted her walking beside a tabby warrior who held her kit in his mouth. Every few steps, the tortoiseshell queen stretched her head to sniff the wet little bundle. It would not be long now before she could settle her kit into the WindClan nursery. Fireheart fell into step beside Graystripe at the rear. They glanced happily at each other, but didn't speak, too caught up in WindClan's excitement at coming home. Even the elders were moving swiftly now, keeping their bodies low and their eyes narrowed against the rain. As the clan joined Deadfoot at the foot of the slope, the deputy got to his paws, and Tallstar took the lead. Without pausing, Tallstar began to follow a narrow sheep trail through the rough grass and heather. As the clan neared the top, some of the warriors raced ahead again. At the brow of the hill, they made proud silhouettes against the stormy sky, while the wind sent ripples through their fur. Ahead stretched their old hunting grounds. Suddenly, 2 apprentices charged past Fireheart and bounded away into the familiar heather. Tallstar stiffened. "Wait," he yowled. "There might be hunting parties from the other clans here." As soon as they heard him, the apprentices skidded to a halt and pelted back to join the clan, their eyes still bright with exhilaration. From a rock-strewn ridge, Fireheart saw the dip in the ground that concealed WindClan's camp. With a purr of delight, Morningflower took her kit from the mouth of the tabby warrior and hurried toward the hollow. Tallstar flicked his tail, and 3 warriors raced forward to escort her as she disappeared over the edge and down into the camp. The WindClan leader paused while the rest of his clan rushed into the sheltering bushes below. He turned to Fireheart and Graystripe, his eyes shining. "My clan is grateful for your help," he meowed. "You have both proved you are warriors worthy of StarClan. WindClan has come home, and it is time for you to return to yours." Fireheart is a bit disappointed at this. He wanted to see Morningflower settled in the nursery with her kit. But Tallstar's right, there's no need for them to stay any longer. Tallstar gets One Whisker and Deadfoot to escort them to Fort Trees, since there may be hostile hunting parties about. Tallstar says, "You have served WindClan well. Tell Bluestar that WindClan will not forget it was ThunderClan who brought them home." "They better not, low-key." So Deadfoot sets off in the direction of Fort Trees. Fireheart and Graystripe follow after him. One Whisker sniffs a rabbit, so he goes off to hunt, and he shortly returns. Graystripe says, "A little better than the RiverClan warriors, eh?" "Thank you, Captain Obvious. They hunt rabbits, like, for a living." And so they all eat the rabbit gratefully. Fireheart is refreshed by the meal, but he's starting to get very sore and weary. They still have a long way to go, and Fireheart starts to wonder if they should take a shortcut through RiverClan's hunting grounds. After all, they're on a mission that had been agreed to at the gathering by all the clans. Could RiverClan really object if they pass through the territory? They're not going to steal prey, so... Fireheart looked around at his companions and meowed tentatively. "You know, it'd be quicker if we followed the river." Graystripe looked up from washing his paw. "But that would mean crossing into RiverClan territory." "We could follow the gorge," Fireheart explained. "RiverClan doesn't hunt there. It's too steep for them to get down to the river." Graystripe gently rested a damp paw on the ground. "Even my claws ache," he murmured. "I wouldn't mind taking a shorter route." He turned his yellow eyes hopefully to the WindClan deputy. Deadfoot looked thoughtful. "Tallstar ordered us to travel with you to Fort Trees," he meowed. "If you don't want to come with us, we'll understand," Fireheart answered quickly. "We'll only be in RiverClan territory for a blink. I can't see us meeting any trouble." Graystripe nodded, but Deadfoot shook his head. "We couldn't let you go into RiverClan territory alone," he meowed. "You're exhausted. If you did meet trouble, you're in no state to deal with it. We won't meet anyone." Fireheart had convinced himself and was determined to convince Deadfoot too. "This is gonna end badly, isn't it?" Deadfoot gazed at him with wise old eyes. "If we did go that way," he mused, "it would let RiverClan know that WindClan is back." Fireheart pricked his ears in understanding. "And once they've smelled fresh WindClan scent, they might not be so keen to come rabbit hunting in your territory again." One Whisker licked the last traces of fresh gill from his lips and remarked, "It'll mean we'll be home before moonrise." "You just want to make sure you get a good nest in your den," Deadfoot retorted. His voice was stern, but there was a good-natured gleam in his eye. So they decide to go through RiverClan territory, and they follow the noise of the river. The path shrinks until it's little more than a narrow strip of grass on the very edge of a deep gorge. The far side of the gorge is only a few fox lengths away. Fireheart wonders if he could leap the gap, but he's too tired and hungry for that. He's very afraid of falling in, but he can't resist peering over the side. Beneath his paws, the ground dropped away in a sheer cliff. Ferns clung to tiny ledges, their leaves glistening, not from rain, but from the spray of the swollen torrent that foamed at the bottom of the gorge. So, Fireheart is very scared by this. They'll still have to follow the path along the gorge until they can cut away from it through the small strip of forest that stood between them and ThunderClan territory. End quote. Deadfoot's ears were pricked and his tail flattened so that it almost dragged along the ground. One Whisker was clearly nervous too. He kept looking sharply up the slope beside them as if he could hear something. Fireheart could hear nothing but the roaring of the river. He glanced anxiously over his shoulder, his eyes darting from side to side. The WindClan cat's wariness was making him uneasy. The steep slope began to flatten out until they could move farther away from the cliff edge. The rain was still driving into their faces, and the darkening sky told Fireheart that the sun was setting, but it would not be long now before they reached the forest. There would be more shelter there. The thought of food and a dry nest cheered Fireheart. Suddenly a warning yowl rumbled in Deadfoot's throat. Fireheart stiffened and tasted the air. A RiverClan patrol! A screech sounded from behind them, and the cat spun around to see 6 RiverClan warriors charging toward them. Fireheart's fur stood on end with horror. The deep gorge with its raging waters was still dangerously close. Yep. I knew it. I knew something would happen. A dark brown RiverClan cat landed on top of him. Fireheart rolled away from the gorge, kicking furiously with his back legs. He felt teeth bite into his shoulders and struggled under the weight of the hissing warrior. He scrabbled desperately on the sodden ground, trying to free himself. The RiverClan warrior raked his side with sharp claws. Fireheart twisted and bit into the fur of his attacker. He clamped his jaws tight and heard the warrior yowl, but the other cat's claws only raked him more fiercely. "This will be the last time you set foot in RiverClan territory," hissed the brown Tom. Around him, Fireheart was aware of his companions struggling fiercely. He knew they were as exhausted as he was from the long trek. He could hear Graystripe yowling violently. One whisker hissed with pain and rage. Then, from the forest behind them, another sound reached Fireheart's ears. It was full of fury, yet it filled Fireheart with a surge of hope. Tigerclaw's war cry. Fireheart smelled the fast-approaching battle scent of a ThunderClan patrol. Tigerclaw, Willowpelt, Whitestorm, and Sandpaw. Yowling and spitting, the ThunderClan cats leaped into the fray. The brown Tom released Fireheart, and he quickly struggled to his paws. He watched as Tigerclaw pinned a gray tabby Tom to the ground, giving a warning bite to the Tom's hind leg. The Tom ran screeching away into the bushes. Tigerclaw whipped around and fixed his pale eyes on Leopard Fur. The mottled RiverClan deputy was wrestling with Deadfoot. The lame warrior was no match for the ferocious RiverClan she-cat. Can we use disabled or, not use strong words to describe Deadfoot? Okay, we get it. We know he has a name that literally indicates he's disabled. We don't really need to keep doing that. Fireheart prepared to leap to the rescue, but Tigerclaw was ahead of him. The dark warrior dived forward and grasped Leopard Fur's wide shoulders. With a mighty yowl, he hauled her off the scrawny WindClan deputy. Fireheart heard a vicious squeal behind him. He spun around to see Sandpaw locked in battle with another RiverClan she-cat. Twisting and tussling, the pair rolled over and over on the wet grass, spitting and clawing each other fiercely. Fireheart gasped. They were rolling toward the rocky edge of the gorge. One more roll and they would be over the side. Fireheart sprang. With a mighty swipe, he bundled the RiverClan warrior off Sandpaw and away from the edge. Sandpaw skidded away, closer to the drop. Fireheart lunged forward and grabbed her by the scruff of her neck with his teeth. She squealed with rage as he dragged her away from the gorge, her paws scrabbling on the muddy ground. She sprang to her paws as soon as he stopped and hissed at Fireheart, her eyes burning with fury. "I can win my own battles without your help." Fireheart opened his mouth to explain, but a terrible howl made them both turn their heads. Graystripe was leaning perilously over the side of the gorge, his hind legs straining. Beside him, Fireheart glimpsed a white paw clutching at the edge. Graystripe leaned down with his mouth open, trying to get a grip on the paw, but it disappeared out of sight in a terrifying rush. Graystripe cried out after it, his wail echoing along the gorge. All the cats stopped fighting at the sound of Graystripe's agonized call. Fireheart froze, panting with shock and exhaustion. The RiverClan cats scrambled to the edge of the gorge. Slowly, Fireheart followed them and looked over the side. Far below, through the deafening spray, he saw the dark head of a RiverClan warrior sink beneath the foaming water. With a cold feeling of horror, Fireheart recalled the words of the WindClan medicine cat. "This day shall bring an unnecessary death." That's the end of chapter 7, and that is where we're going to stop for today. On a rather unfortunate note. Wow, so the prophecy came true. If only Fireheart didn't want to break the law yet again. He's one of those people that breaks the law in a good way. I think if he was on an alignment chart, he would be chaotic good. He's broken the law 3 times now in the past book and a half. And I know he faces a lot of xenophobia, but he's got to think about his actions more, because people are going to take people, as if this is a people book. No, cats are going to take any excuse or any reason to keep being xenophobic towards him and be see, he can't be a real warrior, because he was a kitty pet or whatever. They're gonna use any reason to do that. But yeah, anyway, that's where we're gonna stop for today. Yeah, very unfortunate. We'll see how the rest of the confrontation with RiverClan goes next time on Cat Tales. Thank you for joining me. All other links to the show are in the description. You can find it on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. By anywhere, I just mean Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But yeah, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week, and may StarClan light your path.